Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Virgil Prime once again, and I am here with the third video in my CommandHelper tutorial series. Did have a little bit of feedback from some of the people watching the videos, and the first thing I want to address is a problem somebody had installing CommandHelper. Really quickly, I want to show you what happened. His problem was that in his plugins folder, he dropped CommandHelper into his plugins folder, which is how you install it, just like you should. But it wouldn't generate a folder or any of the configuration files, and it wouldn't load right. If it got to the CommandHelper part when loading up the server, it would fail. So really quickly, I want to show you what we actually ascertained was wrong. If you click up here, it'll show you the full file path of where my server is and where this plugin is. And the problem was, he had, instead of just having his name here in the users, he had whatever his name was, Dustin's computer, right? It was like PC, I think. But anyways, CommandHelper doesn't like spaces, and there was a space in the file path, and so that caused a problem. So what we ended up doing is we didn't change his username. We just copied or moved his entire tutorial folder over to his hard drive, local disk C, so it was running straight out of here, no spaces in the file name, no problem. So moving right along, Gizmo, or Omega on his YouTube channel, said that I should go over some of the more common functions that I use when I'm coding these commands. So these are the ones that I use most often, and they're just perfectly set up to make a teleportation command, so I thought that's what we'd do. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new local package. I'm going to call it CoolTP. Right, because I don't want to overwrite the normal Minecraft teleport command, so I want the command to be /CoolTP instead of /TP. So I'm going to go ahead and make my files as per usual. The only thing I really need, because this is a command, so all I really need is an MSA file, and that's method script alias file, and I'm going to name it CoolTP.msa. Once again, you can name that pretty much whatever you want, as long as it ends in .msa. I'm going to close this and this, and I don't need you open. Alright, so right off the bat, the first thing we need in any command is the command itself. So /CoolTP, make it look a little nicer even though it's case insensitive in game, I believe, by default. And the second part of this command that we need is a user input. So this is where the player is going to type the person they want to teleport to, right? So I'm going to make it name, but it can be whatever you want. This is just arbitrary. So $sign is the important part, though. That tells CommandHelper that this is user input. And one more thing back here, to make sure everybody can use it, you can type in a permission node here, for instance, teleport. And then the permission node would be CommandHelper.alias.teleport or ch.alias.teleport. But I want everybody to be able to use it for just for this. So I'm going to make an asterisk, which just means that anybody can use this command. /CoolTP $name equals. I'm going to make my little arrows, which designate that everything inside these arrows is going to be a code block, right? Alright. Tab over 1 because it looks nice. And for starters, I think I might have gone over the player function before. So the player function looks like this. And by default, if you don't put anything in there, it just gets the player, whoever's typing the command. We need that player because we want to teleport whoever's typing the command to whoever they typed in, right? So player has two functions. The first is to get the player typing the command. The second is when you insert something inside. Now, instead of getting the player typing the command, it's going to get the closest match to whoever, or to whatever you typed inside. So it's only going to be able to get online players. It's not going to work if a player is not logged in, which is exactly what we want, because you can't teleport to a player who isn't logged in anyways. Now, there's a couple of ways we can go about getting that player's location. Alright, the first way is the more complicated way. I'm going to go over first because we can use this for a lot more. It's called pinfo. Alright, so I want to get this player. This function will return the name of whoever I typed in, or the closest to whatever I typed in. And when I say return, I don't think I ever really went over that in my first two videos. What that really means is that when this gets picked up by the computer, this is going to just turn into a name. This whole function is going to disappear, and it's going to be just as if there's a name there. Alright, so I'm going to use pinfo. So I'm going to go to wiki.sk89q.com, or just Google CommandHelper, and I'm sure this is the first page that'll pop up. I'm going to go to CommandHelper. There's a lot of out-of-date information on this webpage, so I'm going to go down to where it says Future Next Version, because that's actually the current version. I'm going to go to Staged API, which is our toolbox full of all kinds of functions we can use. Control F brings up this nice little search function on every browser. And I'm going to type in pinfo. Alright, so I've got my function here. Oops. Maybe. Copy. I'm going to click on See More here because it's going to give me some more usage. Alright, so starting here, this box tells us that we have two possible variables. But the fact that both of them are in brackets tells us that both the variables are, not variables, arguments. Both of the arguments are optional. So this returns various information about the player specified or the current player if no argument was given. So if there are no arguments, if you didn't type in anything inside of pinfo, it's going to return a bunch of information on the player who's running the command. Otherwise, it's going to use whatever player is entered in. Then what is the second argument? Second argument, if a value is set, it should be an integer, a whole number, of one of the following indexes. And only that information, the information for that index, will be returned. Otherwise, if the value is not specified or is -1, returns an array of information, and we're not going to go there because that's a lot of information to sort through. So in this case, what we need is the player's location, which is index 1. So to get that information for player $9, I'm going to type in, I'm going to start with pinfo, because that's our function. The first argument is going to be what the player's name is, and we want to get the match beforehand, so we're going to insert that, and that's going to be our first argument. Okay, so like I said, when the computer reads this, player $name is going to be replaced with the player's name, and then my second argument, 1, will return the player's location, right? So this whole thing will then get erased and replaced with the player's location. Alright, so that all seems to be pretty straightforward. Might be moving a little fast here. pinfo is rather complicated, but if I use something other than 1 here, if I used, say, 8, that'll return true or false with the player's op. It can return the name of the world the player's in. It can return any of this information, so it's quite useful for getting information on the player. So I use it quite often. Now I told you there were 2 ways we can do this. The second way to do this is just to use player location, PLOC, ploc. And ploc returns just an array of the coordinates where the player is standing. So we could also use that, and how that would look is it only takes one argument, so we don't need the 1. And instead of pinfo, we just change this to PLOC. Player location is what that stands for. We're just going to use that because it's simpler. Now, the next thing we're going to need is set player location, right? PLOC. Set, what we're doing is we're setting player 1's location to that of player 2. Can I move you out of the way? I don't need you in the way. So how we're going to do this, set player location takes 2 arguments, possibly more, but anyways, it definitely needs a location array. That is not in brackets, meaning that it is not optional. Whereas the player's name is optional, because as with most of these, it'll just take whoever's running the command if you don't specify. So in this case, we do want to teleport the player who's sending the command, so we don't actually need to use player to return that player's name. So what I can do is I'm going to make this look a little bit nicer. Oops, tab. This should make it a little bit easier to read as well. Just because they're on different lines doesn't mean much of anything, because oopsies, because the player's name is inside of these brackets still. And I'm going to do the same thing with set PLOC. Oops. If I select all this with Notepad++ and hit tab, it'll shift them all over at once. Enter, backspace, and you can see that get highlighted yellow, meaning they connected. And yeah, so that looks pretty good. Set player location to whoever's running the command, because we didn't specify a player. And we're going to set the player's location to the player location of player 2, who's the person that we typed in here. So that should all work. So I'm going to Control S, save. I'm going to go to my server, reload aliases, enter, and that will load in my new command. Sign in the server. And Too Small got on a little bit earlier to help me, and she's been following along. Pop myself out of third person view. Too Small, if you can hear me, teleport to me. And that was /coolTP, right? I can't hear anything, I just realized. Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you walking, but I can't see you. There you are. Hello. So you can see that worked perfectly. I think that's it for that command. I can also, really quickly, I can write a similar command. Copy, enter, enter, can leave a space in between. CoolTP here, $name, and we want to do this differently. So in this case, we want to teleport her to me, right? So as we talked about, this can take 2 different arguments, and the first argument would be the player we're teleporting. So now we want to teleport her to me. So we're going to take where it became her. Enter, paste. Alright, so set block, and this will be whoever's typed in. Put a comma to separate 2 different arguments, right? They're on different lines, but it's still 2 different arguments. And then the second thing we want is to get my player location instead. And I believe that the player's name is actually in brackets, which means it's optional, which means I don't need a second, or I don't need to have a player function in there. I can just leave it blank. Save. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. If there is, I missed it. I reload aliases again. Now we have 2 aliases defined. And now I'm going to go ahead and just wander on over here and cool TP here, too small. bing, and she's right here. You can see it worked perfectly. And this works at any distance. There's no reason, there's nothing to limit it from working at a certain distance. It worked perfectly, and now she's breaking sand. So, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to go over in my next video. I think I want to do kicks and bans for moderator commands. So, but that is a little bit more complicated. I'm going to go over my reference material. Oh, let's see, what else is on my list? Alright, arrays. I did want to get into arrays, and I think I'm going to do that before I stop recording here. Arrays are, I mentioned before, that you can put any kind of data into an I variable, which looks like this, by doing that, right? By putting an equal sign there. So if I want to insert a number, I can do that. If I want to make a word or a sentence, I can put some quotations, some single quotes there, and type whatever I want in the middle. And that's called a string. That's a data type called a string. Okay, let's say my server is called Angel's Reach, which has an apostrophe in it. Uh-oh. You can see the coloration of that. It didn't quite work, because the orange stops here, which means that my string stops here, and it's trying to interpret the rest as code. And if I put this at the top of my file, hold on just a moment. If I put this right here, for instance, you can see what type of a problem it causes for the rest of the file, because now it thinks that I started another string here, and there's no ending for it, so it's just going to think the rest of the file is one huge string. How we remedy this is if I put my cursor just before the apostrophe that I want to get rid of and make a backslash, which is just above your enter key, it's going to tell the interpreter to ignore that apostrophe and just register it as text instead of trying to register it as the end of a string. So that's something that's good to know. I'm going to move that back down there. Alright. So we have a string, we have an integer, we have a float or a double, which looks like this. So, you know, it has a decimal point somewhere in it, and it's a number. We have an array. An array is very special because an array can hold other bits of data in it. And it looks somewhat like this. In this case, I can express it using a function, but it looks like this. Alright, so in this case, we have an array with 3 values. They're obviously players' names. But they can be any type of value in here. These are 3... Oops, I didn't even quote my strings here. But an array is a package that's full of other values. And they can be strings, they can be integers, they can be floats, they can be any combination of any other data type, including other arrays. So it can get pretty complicated if you have arrays within arrays within arrays, but that's all possible. And it comes in handy at certain points. So I'm going to go ahead and go back, and this is very simple in terms of an array, but until I start getting within arrays. But that's how it works. Everything inside of this array function is separated by a comma. Now, in this case, I have assigned @var to array, right? So if I wanted to get just one part of an array out, let's say I wanted to get the first index in the array out, which is Virgil Prime, which is my name. So in this case, I would take @var and put little brackets next to it, and inside of that I would hit 0, because this is the first key in the array. This is the first key, but really the first key is 0, and the second key is always 1, and so on and so forth. So 0, this is going to return Virgil Prime. 1 would return Chaskada, 2 would return Too Small, and so on and so forth. So that took a little getting used to, and you'll probably make the mistake of getting the wrong part of of an array for something at some point. I know it's happened to me several times. That's how arrays work. There's another type of an array, however. In other languages, it's known as a hash map, and we call it in MethodScript an associative array. And the difference between an array and associative array is how the data is stored. So instead of having keys 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, we have keys player 1, Virgin Prime, player 2, Chaskada, player 3, too small, num of eggs 1, and by the way, all these names are technically strings, so I should be quoting them. And this is good for a number of reasons, because let's say that I'm getting a player's coordinates, and of course I can always assume that the first coordinate is going to be the x, the second coordinate is going to be the y, and the third coordinate is going to be the z, and then the fourth coordinate is going to be the world, actually, that the player is in, because there's multiple worlds in Minecraft. Let's call that one height. Alright, so what's nice about this, though, is instead of getting variable 0, I can get variable player 1. Or if I was using a location array, which is the x, y, and z, I can use @var x or world. I can use names to specify what information I want to pull out. So that comes in handy. Get rid of that. So we'll get into a little bit more about why these are used and how these are used. These are used in binds, which is what I explained before, is how you deal with events in Minecraft. But I'm going to cover that in the next video. I'm also going to cover bans and temp bans and whatnot. Probably not temp bans. Temp bans are even more complicated. But I'm definitely going to cover bans. So anyways, if you like this video, please press the little like button and subscribe if you think that you're going to gain something out of these videos, because I'm going to come out with more. And I hope you learned